I never imagined my own children would abandon me in a nursing home on Christmas Eve, claiming it was for my own good. It hurt more than any physical pain I have ever felt. Ironically, it was also in that moment of greatest despair that destiny decided to give me a gift. The forgotten lottery ticket in my pocket wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the beginning of a new life, and the lesson my children would never forget. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Elderly Stories channel. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Sarah. I am 73 years old, and 6 months ago, everything I knew as life collapsed. After my husband Arthur passed away, I continued living in the house we built together over 4 decades. Our home was never luxurious, but it had the essentials. Lots of love memories on the walls, and a garden I cared for with devotion. I realized something was wrong when my 2 children, Richard and Linda, started visiting me more frequently. At first, I was happy with the renewed attention. Richard would come with his wife Mary and their 2 teenage children. Linda would show up with her husband David. The visits always ended with conversations about how I was getting older, how the house was too big for me alone, and how worried they were. "Mom, what if you fall when you're alone? What if you have a health problem in the middle of the night?" they insisted. I would answer that I was fine, that I could still take care of myself. I would show them my immaculate garden as proof that my abilities were intact. They would exchange glances that I pretended not to see. I didn't tell them about the money. Arthur and I saved our whole lives, and when he left an insurance policy that guaranteed me comfort and security. Our children never asked about it, and I never mentioned it. Maybe that was my mistake. The week before Christmas, Richard showed up alone. He was smiling. He talked about celebrating Christmas Eve together, about how wonderful it would be to have the whole family together. "We'll pick you up tomorrow, Mom. Wear something nice. We're going to give you a special surprise." I agreed, excited at the prospect of a family Christmas after spending the last year alone. I packed a small bag with some clothes, my blood pressure medication, a photo of Arthur and me, and I put on my favorite shawl, the one my husband gave me on our last anniversary. When Richard arrived with Mary the next day, I noticed something was strange. They didn't bring the kids. The car had no Christmas decorations. Richard seemed nervous. He spoke quickly, avoiding my gaze. Still, I got in the car, confidently believing it was just anxiety about the surprise they had prepared. The drive was silent. I didn't recognize the route we were taking. We passed through downtown, then through neighborhoods I rarely visited. Finally, we stopped in front of an exposed brick building with a discreet sign. Serene Meadows Senior Living. My heart sped up. "Richard, what are we doing here?" He sighed deeply before answering. "Mom, we talked about this. You can't be alone anymore. They're going to take very good care of you here." "We never talked about this." My voice trembled. "You said we were going to spend Christmas together." "And we will," Mary interrupted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We'll come visit you tomorrow on Christmas. We brought you some little gifts. You're going to like it here. There are activities people your age." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The betrayal was so complete, so cold, that I couldn't even cry. I just looked at the son I raised, the man who was once a boy, who ran into my arms when he scraped his knee, and I didn't recognize him. "Please don't do this to me," I whispered. "I can take care of myself. I have my house." Richard looked at his watch. "It's all arranged, Mom. The house is fine. We need it. Linda and I agreed the best thing is to sell it. The money will help pay for this place." That's when I understood everything. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about the house, about the money. "You can't sell my house. It's in my name." Mary exchanged a quick glance with Richard before saying in a soft voice, "Actually, you signed the papers 3 weeks ago, remember? When we brought those documents about your health insurance." I vaguely remembered signing some papers Richard brought, saying it was just bureaucracy for the health plan Arthur had left. I trusted my children. I never thought I would need to read the fine print on documents they brought me. "You tricked me," I murmured, feeling a pain that went beyond the physical. My own children. "It's for your own good, Mom," Richard insisted, already opening the car door. "Come on, let me help you with your bag." I got out of the car as if in a trance. The cold December wind cut my face, but I only felt a distant tingling. Inside my chest, a void was expanding, consuming everything. Richard took my small suitcase from the trunk, while Mary held my arm as if afraid I might run. At the reception, a middle-aged woman smiled professionally. "Welcome to Serene Meadows, Mrs. Sarah. We were expecting you." Richard filled out some forms while I remained silent. There was nothing to say. When he finished, he turned to me with a forced smile. "All set, Mom. Everything is fine. We'll come visit you tomorrow, I promise." I didn't answer. He gave me a quick kiss on the forehead. Mary waved from a distance. And then they left, returning to the warmth of the car, returning to their lives, leaving me behind like a burden they had finally gotten rid of. The employee led me down the hall to a small room with 2 beds. One of them was occupied by a woman sleeping soundly. "This is your bed, Mrs. Sarah. Dinner is served at 6. If you need anything, just press that button." When she left, I sat on the edge of the hard bed, still clutching my purse to my chest like a shield. Through the window, I could see snowflakes beginning to fall. It was Christmas Eve, and I was alone, betrayed, abandoned. That's when I remembered the lottery ticket in the pocket of my shawl. The week before, when I went to the market to buy ingredients to make Christmas tamales that no one would come to eat, the cashier convinced me to buy a ticket for the special national lottery drawing. "You look like a lucky person," he said with a smile. Now, with trembling fingers, I pulled the wrinkled ticket from my pocket. It was just a piece of paper, but it represented the last decision I had made freely before my children took control of my life. I put it back in my pocket, deciding to check it later when the drawing happened. That night, lying in a strange bed, listening to the breathing of my unknown roommate, I cried silently. Not for the house, not for the money, but for the betrayal, for the ease with which my children erased decades of love and sacrifice. I fell asleep thinking of Arthur, wishing he were there to tell me what to do, to hold me in his strong arms and assure me that everything would be okay. But Arthur was gone, and I was alone. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to the sound of the television in the common room. A few people were gathered there watching the morning news. I didn't want to join them, but I also didn't want to be alone with my dark thoughts. I shuffled in, trying to look less miserable than I felt. An older man offered me a spot next to him on the couch. "First Christmas morning here, isn't it? I can see it on your face," he said kindly. "It gets better. Or at least we get used to it." I nodded, not trusting my voice. On the television, the host was talking about Christmas celebrations around the country, showing images of happy families, decorated trees, presents being opened. Each image was like a knife in my heart. And then something changed in the programming. "And now let's get to the results of last night's special national lottery drawing," the host announced cheerfully. Almost instinctively, I put my hand in the pocket of my shawl, feeling the ticket there. I had no real hope, but at least it distracted me for a moment. I took out the ticket and smoothed it while the numbers began to be announced on the screen. The first number, 07. I looked at my ticket. It was the first number I had marked. Coincidence. Second number, 15. It was also on my ticket. Third, 23. Fourth, 32. Fifth, 41. Sixth, 56. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at the ticket again, then at the screen, then at the ticket again. It wasn't possible. It just wasn't possible. "The winning ticket was sold in the city," the host continued. "The prize amount is $5 million. $5 million. All the numbers matched. The ticket was bought in the city where I lived. My entire body began to tremble. The man next to me looked at me with concern. "Ma'am, are you all right? You're pale." I couldn't answer. I just showed him my ticket, my hand shaking so much I could barely hold it. His eyes widened as he checked the numbers. "My God," he whispered. "You won. You won the lottery." When luck knocks on the door, $5 million. The number echoed in my mind like an impossible mantra. I, Sarah, 73 years old, abandoned in a nursing home on Christmas Eve, was now a millionaire. The irony was so absurd that I almost laughed through my tears. The old man next to me, who I later found out was named Anthony, was the first to react. "We need to protect this," he whispered, helping me fold the ticket carefully. "And we need to tell the administration. You can't keep this here without security." I nodded, still in shock. Anthony called one of the caregivers, a young woman named Clara, and explained the situation. She initially thought we were confused until she saw the ticket and verified the numbers on her cell phone. "Holy," she murmured. "It's true. She really won." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. The director of the home was called, documents were signed, calls were made. An employee from the National Lottery came to the home to verify the ticket, confirming its authenticity. "We will need Mrs. Sarah to come to the lottery headquarters tomorrow to begin the claim process," she explained. "Bring your documents." "We will ensure everything is done correctly." I agreed, still stunned. The director of the home, who had barely noticed my arrival yesterday, was now extremely solicitous. "Mrs. Sarah, we can provide transportation and escort, whatever you need. We want to ensure your safety and comfort." I looked at him, seeing clearly through the sudden kindness. Yesterday I was just an abandoned old woman. Today I was a valuable client. "Thank you," I replied dryly, "but I already have help." I looked at Anthony, who nodded in silent agreement. He understood what the others didn't see, that it wasn't about the money, but about the dignity that had been stolen from me. Meanwhile, the news began to spread. The local press found out that the winning ticket belonged to an elderly woman recently admitted to a nursing home. Reporters started calling, wanting the story. The director tried to control the situation, but it was too late. Around noon, a local TV station van was parked outside. A young reporter managed to get inside and found me in the common room. "Mrs. Sarah, I'm Patricia from Channel 7 News. We would love to interview you about your incredible luck, winning the lottery on Christmas Day." My first impulse was to refuse. I never liked attention. But then I thought about my children. I thought about how comfortable they must be in my house right now, perhaps even toasting to their success in getting rid of the inconvenient mother while taking possession of my assets. "Yes," I replied, surprising myself. "I'll do the interview, but I want to tell the whole story." Patricia seemed thrilled. They quickly set up a small area for the recording. I sat in the wheelchair they insisted I use for the interview, even though I could still walk perfectly with the winning ticket in my hands. "We are live in 3, 2, 1, the cameraman indicated. "We are here at Serene Meadows Senior Living with Mrs. Sarah Mendez, the grand winner of the special National Lottery drawing," Patricia began enthusiastically. "Mrs. Sarah, how are you feeling about this surprising win?" "I'm feeling a lot of things, Patricia. Mainly because yesterday on Christmas Eve my children brought me to this nursing home against my will after tricking me into signing documents, transferring my house to their names." Patricia's smile faltered, but she was a professional. "Are you saying you were abandoned here by your children?" "Exactly." I confirmed, feeling a strength grow inside me. "They told me we were going to celebrate Christmas together. Instead, they left me here, informing me they would sell my house, which I built with my late husband over 40 years, to pay for this place." Patricia was clearly in shock, but she also sensed she had a much bigger story on her hands than she expected. "And the lottery ticket." I showed the paper to the camera. "I bought it last week before I knew what my children were planning. It was in the pocket of my shawl when they brought me here. This morning, I saw the drawing on television and found out I won $5 million. This is extraordinary." Patricia seemed to be searching for the right words. "And what do you plan to do now?" I thought for a moment before answering. "First, I'm going to get my house and my dignity back. After that, well, let's just say I have plans to ensure other seniors don't go through what I went through." The camera continued rolling as I recounted details of how I was deceived, how my children had planned everything, how I felt when I realized I was being abandoned on Christmas Eve. I didn't shed a single tear. I spoke with clarity and firmness, looking directly at the camera. "You mentioned your children. Do they know you won the lottery?" I shook my head. "Not yet, but I'm sure they're watching now." I looked directly into the camera. "Richard, Linda, I hope you're enjoying Christmas in my house. Make the most of it, because things are going to change starting tomorrow." When the interview ended, Patricia squeezed my hand with genuine emotion. "Mrs. Sarah, your story is incredible. If you need anything, please contact us." I thanked her, and watched the TV crew leave, knowing my message was on the air, reaching every corner of the city, including the living room of my house where my children were probably frozen in shock right now. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after the broadcast, my cell phone, which Richard hadn't taken from me, probably so he could call and check if I was adjusting well, began to ring. His name flashed on the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then he called again and again. Next, it was Linda's turn. Messages started pouring in. "Mom, we need to talk. Please answer. It's not what you're thinking. We're on our way there now." I turned off the cell phone and put it in my purse. They didn't deserve my attention right now, not after what they did. Anthony approached, sitting beside me. "I think you caused quite a stir," he said with a small smile. "They deserve much more than a stir," I replied, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. "They deserve to understand what it's like to be betrayed by someone you love." Around 4 in the afternoon, Richard and Linda arrived at the nursing home. I was in the common room playing cards with Anthony and 2 other residents when they burst through the door, followed by the director, who was trying to calm them down. "Mom!" Richard exclaimed, his face red with agitation. "What did you do? Why did you give that interview? Why didn't you answer my calls?" I looked at him calmly, placing my cards on the table. "Good afternoon, Richard. Merry Christmas. What a surprise you came to visit me. I thought you'd be busy at my house." "Mom?" Linda intervened, her tone conciliatory, the one she always used when she wanted to manipulate me. "You misunderstood everything. We never wanted to hurt you. We just wanted what was best for you." "What was best for me?" I repeated, feeling the cold anger I had kept under control finally start to escape. "Tricking me into signing documents, bringing me to a nursing home against my will, taking my house. That was what was best for me." "You need care," Richard insisted. "You can't be alone anymore." "That's a lie, and you know it," I replied. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. You wanted the house. You wanted to get rid of the inconvenience I had become. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. You just didn't expect me to win the lottery, did you?" The silence that followed was deafening. The other residents watched the scene with poorly disguised interest. Anthony remained by my side, a silent presence of support. "Mom," Linda finally spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "Let's go home. Let's sort this out as a family." "Which home, Linda?" I asked. "The one you stole from me." "We didn't steal anything," Richard protested. "You signed the papers." "Papers, you told me, were for health insurance," I retorted. "That has a name, Richard. It's called fraud." "Mom, please." Linda approached, trying to take my hand. I pulled back. "Please. You won the lottery. It's a Christmas miracle. Let's celebrate it together, as a family." I looked at her, at the face that looked so much like mine, at the eyes she inherited from her father, and I felt only sadness. "Family. You stopped being my family the moment you abandoned me in this place." "We didn't abandon you," Richard insisted, his voice rising. "We came to visit you today, didn't we?" "After you found out I won the lottery," I corrected. "It's funny how money changes everything, isn't it?" The director of the home, who was watching the scene with growing discomfort, finally intervened. "Perhaps it's best to continue this conversation in private. I can make my office available." "That won't be necessary," I replied, standing up. "I have nothing more to say to my children today. Tomorrow, I will be at the National Lottery to collect my prize, and after that, I will be with my lawyers to reverse the fraudulent transfer of my house." "Mom, please." Richard seemed desperate now. "We can work this out. We're family." "Family doesn't abandon family on Christmas Eve," I replied simply, turning to leave the room. "You made your choice yesterday. Now you're going to have to live with the consequences." I walked down the hall toward my room, feeling their gazes on my back, hearing Linda start to cry, and Richard arguing with the director. For the first time since I arrived at that place, I walked with my head held high. Not as a victim, but as someone who had finally reclaimed her power. Inside the room, I sat on the bed and allowed a single tear to roll down. Not of sadness, but of relief. The worst was over. The betrayal, the pain, the abandonment. From now on, I was in control of my life again. And that $5 million, well, I already knew exactly what I would do with it. My children thought they were getting rid of a useless old woman. They had no idea they had just created their worst adversary. The morning after Christmas dawned clear and cold. I woke up early, even before the sun fully lit the room. I hadn't been able to sleep much with so many thoughts and plans occupying my mind. Next to my bed, the cell phone I had turned back on showed dozens of missed calls and messages, all from Richard and Linda, all ignored. I took a shower, put on the same clothes I had arrived in, the only ones I had with me, besides pajamas, and I waited. At 9, a soft knock on the door revealed Clara, the caregiver. "Mrs. Sarah, there's a lawyer in the reception asking for you. He said you called him." I smiled. "Yes, thank you. I'll be right out to see him." The night before, after my children finally left, not without trying a few more emotional manipulations, I asked Anthony to lend me his cell phone. I called a number I had kept in my memory for years, that of Dr. Edward Miller, the lawyer who handled all of my and Arthur's legal affairs. He answered, surprised to hear my voice, and even more surprised to hear where I was and what had happened. "I'll be there tomorrow at 9, he promised without hesitation, and there he was right on time. Edward looked exactly the same as always. Gray hair, well-combed, impeccable suit, leather briefcase under his arm. When he saw me, however, his professional expression gave way to genuine concern. "Sarah," he said, taking my hands, "I saw you on television yesterday. I could hardly believe it. How are you?" "Surviving," I replied. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "You should have called me the moment this happened," he gently chided me. "You know I've always been available to you." I was in shock, I admitted, and to be honest, ashamed. I never imagined my own children. He squeezed my hands. "You don't need to explain. I'm here now and we're going to fix everything. First, we need to go to the lottery office to claim the prize. After that, we have a lot of work to do." I nodded. Edward got a taxi, refusing the director's offer to use the home's car, and we left together. On the way to the National Lottery, Edward explained the plan. "I reviewed the documents you said you signed. If you genuinely believed you were signing health insurance papers, we have a solid case for fraud. We will reverse the transfer of the house without a doubt. As for the lottery prize, I will ensure it is deposited into a secure account that only you can access." Arriving at the lottery office, we were received efficiently. The case had gained notoriety. The abandoned old woman who won the lottery, and the employees seemed eager to help. I signed the necessary documents, presented my identification, and within a few hours I was officially $5 million richer. "The money will be available in your account within 48 hours, the president explained with a wide smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. Sarah. A happy ending to a sad story." "It's not the end yet," I replied, exchanging a look with Edward. "It's just the beginning." As we left the agency, we found reporters waiting. The news had spread even further. Flashes went off, questions were shouted. Edward, being the excellent lawyer he was, took control. "Mrs. Sarah Mendez appreciates the interest, but she will not be making any further statements at this time. We are focused on correcting the injustices committed against her and ensuring her future well-being. Thank you." He quickly guided me to a car he had called, and we left. Not for the nursing home, but for a hotel in the city center. "You are not going back there," he declared firmly. "From today on, you will stay in a safe place until we resolve the situation with your house." At the hotel, while Edward checked me in, I saw the news on the lobby television. My face was there alongside sensational headlines. "Abandoned grandmother wins lottery. Instant karma. And ungrateful children destiny's revenge." It made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to make a spectacle a story of revenge. I just wanted justice and my dignity back. In the hotel room, Edward opened his briefcase and got to work. Calls were made, documents drafted, strategies outlined. Around noon, he received a call which he answered with a serious expression. "It's your children," he said, covering the phone. "They want to talk to you. They are at the office with my partner trying to clarify the situation." I took a deep breath. "Put it on speaker." Richard's voice was anxious, tense. "Mom, we're here with Dr. William. We need to talk. This whole thing is a big misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding," I repeated. "Is that what you call tricking your mother into stealing her house and abandoning her in a nursing home on Christmas Eve?" "We didn't want to hurt you," Linda chimed in, her voice thick. "We were worried. You were alone in that big house. What if you needed help in the middle of the night?" "Lies," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the pain. "If you were worried, you would have spoken to me honestly. You would have offered me options, but you deceived me, forced me to sign papers without knowing what they were, and abandoned me without warning. Mom, please." Linda's voice was tearful now. "Let's talk in person. We can solve this as a family." "As a family," I repeated. "Family doesn't do what you did. Now, if you want to talk, it will be through our lawyers." "Is it about the money?" Richard asked, his voice betraying irritation. "You won the lottery, and now you think you don't need us anymore." The question shocked me with its hypocrisy. "No, Richard. Oh, it's about the betrayal. The money just gave me the means to fight against the injustice you committed." Edward intervened. "Sir, ma'am, I suggest you hire a lawyer. We will be filing an action to annul the transfer of the property due to fraud, as well as seeking compensation for moral damages. If you want to avoid a long and potentially embarrassing process, we are open to a settlement." "A settlement?" Richard sounded indignant. "She's our mother. We're not negotiating with strangers." "You treated me like a stranger when you abandoned me," I replied. "Now you will treat me as a legal adversary." Edward ended the call after informing them that all future contact should be through him. When I hung up, I realized I was shaking. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I nodded. "I'm just tired of being treated as if I'm incapable of making my own decisions, as if getting older means losing the right to your own life." In the following hours, Edward continued to work while I rested. The hotel was comfortable, much more so than the nursing home, but it wasn't my home. I thought constantly about my garden, my things, the space Arthur and I had built with so much love. At the end of the afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. Anthony, my new friend from the home, came to see me, bringing the small suitcase I had left behind. "How did you find me?" I asked, surprised and touched by the gesture. "I have my ways," he replied with an enigmatic smile. "And when you live as long as I have, you learn to recognize good people. I wanted to make sure you were okay." I invited him to sit and offered him tea, which I ordered from room service. We talked about our lives and our families. I found out that Anthony had been a university history professor and was at the home by his own choice after losing his wife to cancer. "I didn't want to be a burden to my daughters," he explained. "They live far away. They have their lives. But they visit me regularly. They call me every day. The difference is, it was my choice." I nodded, understanding completely. Choice makes all the difference. When Anthony left, I promised to visit him at the home as soon as I could. He was a reminder that there was kindness in the world, even in the most unlikely places. The next morning, Edward arrived with news. "We got an injunction preventing the sale of the house until the case is judged. We also requested an expert analysis of the documents you signed to prove the fraud." "And how long will that take?" "Months. But with the high-profile nature of the case and the clear evidence, we should be able to speed up the process. In the meantime," he hesitated briefly, "I received an offer from your children. They want to make a deal." I raised my eyebrows. "What kind of deal?" "They will return the house voluntarily with a formal apology if you drop the charges and keep the matter out of the media." Apparently, Richard was suspended from his job and Linda is suffering from social pressure. A part of me felt satisfaction hearing they were facing consequences, but another part, the mother that still existed in me, felt a pang of sadness. "And what do you think?" I asked. Edward considered it carefully. "Legally, it's a good offer. You get your house back quickly without a grueling process, but the decision is yours. You were deeply hurt." I reflected for a moment. "I will accept the deal, but with one additional condition. I want them to do volunteer work at a senior nursing home for 1 full year. I want them to see what abandonment is like, what it's like to be treated as disposable when you get old." Edward smiled. "I will include that in the terms. It's fair." 3 days later, we signed the agreement. Richard and Linda were not present, only their lawyers. The house officially returned to my name, and they committed to the volunteer work. The lottery prize had been deposited in my account, and I was ready to start over. When I finally returned home a week after being taken away, everything seemed different. The same walls, the same furniture, but something had changed. Maybe it was me. I was no longer just Arthur's widow, the mother of Richard and Linda. I was Sarah, a woman who had faced betrayal and come out stronger. On the first night back home, I sat on the patio with a cup of tea, looking at my garden, which was beginning to show signs of neglect. I'll take care of it tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I'll start rebuilding not just the garden, but my life. The phone rang. It was Linda. I hesitated, but answered. "Mom?" Her voice sounded small, almost childlike. "I just wanted to know if you're okay." "I'm fine, Linda," I replied, without hostility, but without warmth. "Better now that I'm home." "Can we visit you someday?" she asked hesitantly. I took a deep breath. "Maybe, someday, but not now. I need time." "I understand," she said, and for the first time she sounded sincere. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm truly sorry." "I know," I replied. And it was true. I knew they were sorry. Now. "Do your volunteer work. Learn. Then we'll talk." When I hung up, I realized I no longer felt anger, just a deep determination to live my remaining days on my own terms. And that $5 million. Well, I already had plans for it. Plans that would make Arthur proud. Plans that would ensure other seniors never went through what I went through. Destiny had given me a second chance, and I had no intention of wasting it. A month passed since I returned home. A month of reorganization, of healing, of planning. The lottery money was safe in the bank, growing with interest, while I decided exactly how to use it. I resumed my routine with renewed pleasure. Gardening in the morning, reading in the afternoon, short walks around the neighborhood at dusk. My neighbors, who had seen the whole story on television, now greeted me with an almost reverent respect. The abandoned old woman who turned the tables had become a kind of local celebrity. Edward came to visit me regularly, not just as a lawyer, but as a friend. It was during one of those visits that I finally shared my plan with him. "I want to create a foundation," I announced as I served tea on the patio. "A foundation to help vulnerable seniors, especially those at risk of abandonment or abuse." Edward nodded, approving the idea. "It's a noble project, Sarah. It's quite ambitious." "I have money and time," I replied with a smile, "and more importantly, I have motivation. No one should go through what I went through." In the following days, we worked on the details. The New Dawn Foundation, a name chosen to symbolize the rebirth I myself was experiencing, would be dedicated to providing free legal assistance to seniors, creating dignified assisted living programs, and promoting awareness about the rights of the elderly. "I want it to be a legacy," I explained to Edward, "something that continues long after I'm gone." "It will be," he guaranteed, "and I can help with all the legal and structural parts." A week later, I received an unexpected call. It was Anthony, my friend from the nursing home. "Sarah," his voice sounded urgent, "you need to come to Serene Meadows. They're closing the place down. All the residents are being transferred to public institutions, many of questionable quality." My heart tightened. What happened? The owner went bankrupt. After the scandal with your case, many families pulled their relatives out of here. The place's reputation was ruined. I felt a pang of guilt despite knowing I had done nothing wrong. "I'm on my way now." I called a taxi, and in less than an hour I was back at the nursing home. The place looked different now, emptier, gloomier. Employees were packing things. The residents seemed confused and scared. I found Anthony in the common room, talking with other seniors, trying to calm them. "Sarah," he exclaimed when he saw me, "it's a good thing you came. I spent the entire afternoon there, listening to stories, comforting people, taking notes. Many like me had been left there by families who no longer wanted to care for them. Others had chosen the place for the quality of service, which despite everything was better than many alternatives. At the end of the afternoon, I asked to speak with the director. He received me in his office, visibly dejected. "Mrs. Sarah," he began awkwardly, "I hope you understand that what happened with you was regrettable, but not representative of our services." I interrupted him with a gesture. "I didn't come to talk about the past. I came to talk about the future. I heard the home is closing." He nodded, discouraged. "Unfortunately, the costs are high. The number of residents dropped drastically after the incident with you. We have no way to continue." "And what if you had an investor?" I asked directly. "Someone interested in buying the place and transforming it into something better." His eyes widened in understanding. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting we could talk business," I confirmed. "I have plans for a foundation focused on seniors. This place could be the first project." After a long conversation about numbers, conditions, and visions for the future, I left the office with a preliminary agreement. I would buy Serene Meadows, I would completely renovate it, and transform it into the headquarters of the New Dawn Foundation. When I shared the news with Anthony and the other residents, the reaction was one of relief and hope. I promised that no one would be removed, that the quality of service would only improve, and that together we would create a model of how seniors should be treated, with respect, dignity, and autonomy. On the way out, I ran into Clara, the caregiver, who had been kind to me during my days at the home. "What you're planning is wonderful," she said with sincerity. "Many of these elderly people have nowhere else to go. You are saving lives." "I'm just doing what should be done," I replied, "and I'm going to need good people like you to make this dream a reality." Back home, I called Edward and shared the news. He was enthusiastic but cautious. "It's a big step, Sarah. Are you sure you want to take on this responsibility?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied. "It's as if everything, the betrayal of my children winning the lottery, meeting those people, everything led me to this moment, to this purpose." In the following months, I immersed myself fully in the project. Serene Meadows was bought, reformed, and reopened as the New Dawn Community Center. The facilities were modernized, the staff was expanded and trained, and new programs were implemented. I created different types of care: permanent residence for seniors who needed constant care, temporary residence for those in medical recovery, and a day center for seniors who still lived with their families but needed companionship and activities during the day. Anthony became my right-hand man, using his academic experience to create educational and cultural programs for the residents. Clara was promoted to care coordinator, training the team with the values of respect and empathy that I admired so much in her. Within 6 months, the center was already recognized as a benchmark in elderly care. Newspapers and magazines wanted to do reports on the transformation on the abandoned old woman who used her fortune to help others in the same situation. It was during one of these interviews that I received an unexpected visit. I was in the center's garden, newly inaugurated, and inspired by my own garden at home, when I saw Richard and Linda approaching, hesitant. They looked different. Richard seemed to have aged years in just a few months, and Linda was thinner with visible dark circles under her eyes. Both seemed nervous, out of place. "Mom," Richard spoke first, his voice low, "the place looks incredible. What you've done here is extraordinary." "Thank you," I replied, maintaining my composure. It was the first time I had seen them since the day they abandoned me. "Are you fulfilling the agreement, doing the volunteer work?" They nodded. Linda explained. "We're working at a public nursing home on the east side twice a week, as we agreed." "And how is the experience?" I asked, genuinely curious. Richard looked down. "Hard. Eye-opening. I never understood how seniors are treated, how invisible they are to so many." "How we almost made you invisible." Linda completed, her voice thick. "Mom, there are no excuses in the world for what we did, but we want you to know that we are truly sorry and that the work at the home is changing us." I looked at my children, the same ones I had raised with so much love, whom I had taught values, whom I had supported in every step of their lives. I saw the regret in their eyes, the shame, but also something new: understanding. "Regret is the first step," I replied finally. "Real change comes with actions, not words." "We know," said Richard. "And that's why, in addition to the mandatory volunteer work, we've started a support group for families of seniors to help them understand the challenges, to find solutions that don't involve what we did." I was surprised by the initiative. "That is admirable." It was Linda's idea, Richard admitted. She realized that many families are overwhelmed, not knowing how to care for elderly relatives, and end up making desperate decisions. It's not an excuse, Linda hurried to add. Nothing justifies what we did, but we want to transform our mistake into something positive. We stood in silence for a moment, just the sound of the wind in the leaves and the distant voices of the residents filling the air. Then I made a decision. Would you like to see the center? See what we're doing here? Their faces lit up with hope. Nodding, they followed me as I showed them the facilities, explaining each program, each innovation, designed to preserve the dignity of the elderly. At the end of the tour, I stopped in the main hall where several residents were participating in a painting class. Among them was Anthony, who observed us discreetly. This is my new family, I explained to Richard and Linda. People who accept me as I am, who value my experience, who respect my choices. Here I found a purpose that goes beyond just being a mother or a widow. We understand, Linda said with tears in her eyes. And we're glad you found it, even if we were the worst children in the world. I sighed. You weren't the worst. You were humans who made a terrible mistake. The question is, what are you going to do from now on? When they left, I watched them from the window. I didn't know if I would ever be able to forgive them completely, if our relationship would ever go back to what it was. But there was a beginning of healing there, a possibility of redemption. Anthony approached, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. Your children, I nodded. They came to see what we're doing here. And what did you think of the meeting? I thought for a moment. You know, Anthony, when I won the lottery, I thought the universe was compensating me for the betrayal. Now I see it was something more. It was an opportunity to transform pain into purpose. He smiled. And you seized that opportunity magnificently. That night, sitting on the patio of my house, I realized that the loneliness I had feared so much after Arthur's death no longer existed. I had a new family now, not of blood, but of choice, and I had a greater purpose that filled me with energy every morning. The lottery money hadn't just given me financial independence. It had given me the chance to redefine who I was and what I wanted to leave for the world. Sarah, the woman who transformed abandonment into strength betrayal, into purpose pain, into healing. And that was worth much more than $5 million. A year after the inauguration of the New Dawn Center, the foundation had already expanded beyond my wildest dreams. What started as a single renovated nursing home now included 3 units in different areas of the city, serving more than 200 seniors. The model we created based on respect, autonomy, and quality of life began to attract the attention not only of the media, but of politicians and specialists in public policy for the elderly. We were changing the perception of aging, one person at a time. On a spring afternoon, while working in the office, I set up at the Foundation's headquarters. I received a visit that would once again change the course of things. Anthony entered, accompanied by an elegant woman I recognized immediately, the city's Secretary of Social Welfare. Sarah, Anthony began, visibly excited. Dr. Lucy came to see our work personally and has an interesting proposal. Dr. Lucy extended her hand with a warm smile. Mrs. Sarah, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I have been following the extraordinary work of the New Dawn Foundation. We talked for over an hour. The secretary explained that the City Council was reviewing its policies for the elderly and wanted to incorporate some of the innovations we had implemented in our units. What you have achieved here is revolutionary, she commented, looking around the cozy and dignified space we had created. Public nursing homes are overcrowded with precarious infrastructure and an outdated approach. We would like to establish a partnership. The proposal was bold. The City Council would offer land and part of the financing for the New Dawn Foundation to expand its operations, implementing its model in public institutions. In return, we would share our methodology, training, and quality standards. It's an opportunity to impact the lives of thousands of seniors, not just those who can pay for private care, Dr. Lucy explained. I looked at Anthony, who nodded enthusiastically. Think about it, Sarah. It's the opportunity to systematize what we've learned to create structural changes. I accepted the proposal on the spot. In the following months, we dove into intense work. We created manuals, training programs, and evaluation systems. We visited public nursing homes, identified problems, and proposed solutions. The work was exhaustive but deeply gratifying. Each transformed institution meant dozens of seniors regaining their dignity and quality of life. During one of these visits to a particularly problematic public home, I had a surprise. Among the volunteers helping with the transition to the new model, I recognized a familiar face. Linda. She didn't see me immediately, busy helping an elderly woman move with a walker. I watched from a distance, the gentleness with which she held the woman's arm, the patience with which she adjusted her pace to the small, unsteady steps. When our eyes finally met, I saw the moment of recognition in her eyes, followed by nervousness. I approached slowly. "I didn't know you worked here," I commented. "I started as a volunteer fulfilling the agreement," she explained, unable to look me directly in the eyes. "But afterward, I kept coming. I ended up being hired part-time as an occupational therapy assistant." "And your previous job?" I asked, surprised. Linda was an accountant at a multinational corporation with a considerable salary. "I quit," she admitted. "After everything that happened after what we did, I realized I was living an empty life, working just for money, for status. Here, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." I looked at my daughter with new eyes. The well-dressed, always impeccable woman who had helped abandon me was now wearing a simple uniform, her hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her nails short and unpolished. But her eyes had a light I hadn't seen in years. "I'm proud of you," I said, finally, surprising both of us with my words. Linda blinked rapidly, holding back tears. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." That same week, during a meeting with the Foundation's team, I suggested the creation of a new program, a training course for caregivers of the elderly offered free of charge to low-income individuals. Many families abandon their elders because they don't know how to care for them, I explained. They don't have the knowledge, resources, or emotional structure. If we can equip them with practical tools, we would be preventing the problem instead of just treating it, Anthony completed. "Brilliant, Sarah." The program started modestly, with 20 students in a makeshift room at the center. I invited health professionals, social workers, and psychologists to teach classes on various topics, from basic first aid techniques to stress management for caregivers. To my surprise, one of the first people to offer to teach was Richard. He appeared in my office on a rainy afternoon looking nervous but determined. "I heard about the training program," he said after the initial formalities. "I'd like to contribute. I'm a physical therapist. I can teach mobilization techniques, fall prevention, adapted exercises." I hesitated. Our relationship was still strained, marked by sporadic encounters and superficial conversations. "Why, Richard? Why do you want to get involved in this?" He sighed deeply. "Because for all the time I worked in rehabilitation, I never really cared about my elderly patients. They were just cases numbers. After what we did to you after the volunteer work, I started to see the people behind the age, and I want to do better." I studied my son's face, the firstborn, who was once the pride of the family. I saw sincerity, I saw regret, but above all, I saw the same determination I myself felt. "All right," I finally agreed. "You can teach in the program, but I'm going to be watching closely." In the following weeks, I watched Richard working with the students in the course. I saw how he patiently explained each technique, how he demonstrated the exercises with respect and care, how he answered questions with genuine attention. In one of those classes, I was especially moved to see him teaching a group of women how to transfer an elderly person from the bed to the wheelchair. "The most important thing," he explained, "is to remember that we are not moving an object but a person. Someone with a history, with feelings, with dignity. Tell them what you are doing, ask for permission, respect their pace." After the class, I approached him. "You're a good teacher." He smiled, surprised by the compliment. "I learned from the best. You always taught us to respect others." Apparently, the lesson didn't stick the first time. I commented, unable to hold back a sting of bitterness. Richard looked down, accepting the criticism. "We deserve that and much more, but we're trying, Mom. We're really trying to do better." And that night I reflected on the incredible journey my life had taken, from the deep pain of abandonment to the joy of creating something meaningful, from isolation to building a new community, from the betrayal of my children to the possibility of redemption that was now emerging. I realized that the lottery money had just been a catalyst. The real change came from the choices we made every day. Me, Anthony, Richard, Linda, and all the people touched by the Foundation's work. The next day, I organized a dinner at my house. For the first time in almost 2 years, I invited my children to come together. I prepared the food myself. The lasagna that was a family tradition, the salad that Arthur loved so much, the flan I made for the children's birthdays. When they arrived separately, but at almost the same time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Resentment still present, but also a new hope. Not for what we had been, but for what we could become. The dinner began tense with superficial conversations about the weather and general news. Gradually, however, the conversation deepened. We talked about the Foundation, about the ongoing projects, about plans for the future. "I've been thinking a lot," I finally said, looking at my 2 children, "about forgiveness." They immediately became attentive, almost holding their breath. "What you did was unforgivable." I continued, feeling the weight of each word. "You betrayed my trust in the worst way possible. You tried to erase me from your existence." Richard lowered his head. Linda bit her lip, holding back tears. "But I see the work you are doing. I see genuine change. And I realized something important. Holding a grudge doesn't help me. It doesn't serve the greater purpose I've found." I took a deep breath before continuing. "I can't promise that our relationship will ever be what it was. Some breaks can't be completely repaired, but I am willing to build something new, something different, based on who we are now, not on who we were before." The silence that followed was deep, charged with emotion. It was Linda who broke it, her voice thick. "Thank you, Mom. We don't deserve this chance, but I promise we won't waste it." Richard nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming freely down his face. That dinner marked a new chapter in our family history. It wasn't complete forgiveness, nor forgetting the past, but it was a beginning, a seed of reconciliation planted in still difficult soil, but with the potential to grow. In the following weeks, the New Dawn Foundation continued to expand. The caregiver training program became a huge success, with waiting lists for new classes. We began documenting our methodology in a manual that would be published and distributed for free to institutions across the country. On a sunny morning, I received a call I never expected. It was from a national television producer, Mrs. "Sarah," the cheerful voice on the other end of the line began, "we are preparing a special on initiatives that are transforming the reality of seniors in this country, and the New Dawn Foundation is the main highlight. We would like to do a series of interviews with you and your team." I hesitated. I never sought fame or recognition. The foundation was about the work, not about me. "I understand your hesitation," the producer continued, sensing my silence. "But think about the positive impact. Your story can inspire other people, other cities to implement similar changes." I consulted Anthony and Edward before making a decision. Both were unanimous. The national visibility would be beneficial not only for the foundation, but for the cause of seniors as a whole. "Besides," Anthony added with a smile, "who better than you to talk about rebirth in old age?" The film crew arrived 2 weeks later. They spent days documenting the center's operations, interviewing residents, employees, and families. The main focus, however, was my personal story: the betrayal, the lottery, the transformation of pain into purpose. "Did you ever think about just enjoying the money?" the reporter asked during my main interview. "Traveling, buying a beach house, living luxuriously after everything that happened?" I smiled. "You know I did. For a brief moment, I considered buying a huge house with a pool and sending pictures to my children, showing how happy I was without them." I laughed at my own confession, but I realized that would just be an elaborate form of revenge, And revenge keeps you trapped in the past, in the pain. I wanted freedom. I wanted a future. And did that future include your children? The reporter asked carefully. I glanced to the side where Richard and Linda were watching the interview, having agreed to participate as well. That future included forgiveness. Not necessarily forgetting, but the ability to move forward. My children are doing their part to repair what they did, not just to me, but to the community. The interview continued, touching on all aspects of our journey. We talked about the challenges of caring for seniors, the transformation of public nursing homes, the training program. At the end of the day, as the crew was packing up, the reporter approached me again. Mrs. Sarah, in my entire career interviewing people, I have rarely seen someone with so much light. You transformed a personal tragedy into a movement that is changing lives. How did you do it? I reflected for a moment before answering. I think it was because I understood I had two choices: languish in bitterness or flourish through the pain. And I realized that at 73 I still had a lot to give, a lot to live for. I paused. Do you know what's most ironic? If my children hadn't abandoned me, if I hadn't won the lottery, I would probably be at home right now tending my garden, living a small, comfortable, but small life. So you don't regret what happened? I don't regret how I responded to what happened, I corrected. The betrayal hurt. It still hurts when I think about that cold night, that feeling of being discarded. But I am grateful for what I built from it. The documentary aired 2 months later in prime time. I watched it with a small group of people who had become my new family: Anthony, Edward, Clara, some residents from the center, and yes, Richard and Linda. Seeing my story on the big screen narrated with sensitivity and respect was a surreal experience. The documentary didn't portray me as a victim, but as a resilient woman who transformed adversity into opportunity. It also didn't paint my children as complete villains, but as people who made a terrible mistake and were working hard to redeem themselves. The program's impact was immediate and overwhelming. The next morning, our phone wouldn't stop ringing. People from all over the country wanted to know more about the foundation, wanted to contribute, wanted to implement similar programs in their cities. Authorities from other municipalities contacted us, interested in partnerships. Companies offered donations. Universities proposed collaborative research. A week after the broadcast, we held an emergency meeting with the entire foundation team. The potential for expansion was enormous, but we needed structure, organization, and careful planning. We can create regional hubs, Edward suggested, adapt the model for different realities, train local teams. And we need to ensure that quality is not compromised, Anthony added. Growing is good, but not at any cost. In the midst of the meeting, I received unexpected news. The Ministry of Social Welfare had made contact proposing a partnership to implement the New Dawn Foundation's model as a national public policy for the elderly. When I shared the news, the room exploded in applause and tears of joy. Our local work could potentially impact the lives of millions of seniors across the country. That night alone at home, I sat on the patio with a cup of tea as I used to do in simpler times. I looked at the starry sky and thought of Arthur. He always said that everything in life happens for a reason, even the most painful things. "You were right, my love," I whispered to the stars. Who would have thought that at 73 I would begin the greatest adventure of my life? I thought about how it all began, with an act of betrayal so painful I thought I wouldn't survive, with a forgotten lottery ticket that changed everything, with a decision to transform pain into purpose. And now, less than 2 years later, I was at the forefront of a national movement. I had a new family, not just my children in the process of redemption, but an entire community of people committed to the same vision. I had a purpose that filled me with energy every morning. Life had given me not just a second chance, but a new beginning, a rebirth that proved it's never too late to start over, to define who we are, to leave a legacy that transcends our own existence. 3 years passed since that cold night I was abandoned in the nursing home. 3 years of intense work, of personal growth, of building a legacy I never imagined possible. The New Dawn Foundation now has a presence in 15 states, with more than 50 centers following our methodology. Our caregiver training program had graduated over 3,000 people, many of them now employed in our own units or taking their knowledge to homes and institutions across the country. I continued as president of the board, participating in strategic decisions and serving as an ambassador for the cause. But my day-to-day life was much quieter, divided between my garden, which had become a small oasis of peace, my books, which I finally had time to read, and regular visits to the original center, where I had made dear friends among the residents. On an autumn afternoon, while working in my office at the Foundation's headquarters, Anthony entered with a worried expression. "Sarah, did you see the time? We have a meeting with the ministry team in 20 minutes. I looked at the clock and sighed. "Sorry, Anthony. I lost track of time reviewing these reports." He came closer, observing the piles of documents on my desk. "You're working too much. We need to distribute these responsibilities better." "I'm fine," I insisted, although I felt the weariness in my bones. "There's still so much to do." Anthony looked at me with that mix of affection and concern that had become characteristic of our friendship. "Sarah, you built something extraordinary. It's time to trust that others can carry part of that burden." I thought about his words during the meeting with the ministry representatives. We discussed expanding the program to more remote regions of the country, the challenges of adapting to different cultural realities, the necessary resources. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I tried to ignore it, but the pain intensified, radiating down my left arm. My vision began to blur. "Sarah." Anthony's voice sounded distant. "Are you okay?" I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come out. The last thing I saw before the darkness was my friend's worried face calling for help. I woke up in a hospital room, the steady beep of heart monitors in the background. Richard was by my side holding my hand. When he realized I was awake, his face lit up with relief. "Mom, thank God." "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a bus," I replied, my voice weak. "What happened?" "You had a heart attack." He explained, the professional tone of the physical therapist mixing with the concern of the son. "It wasn't severe thanks to the quick response, but the doctor says it's a warning. You need to slow down." I closed my eyes, absorbing the information. A heart attack. At 76, after everything I had overcome, it would be ironic to succumb to overwork. In the following days, I received a parade of visitors in the hospital. Linda, who practically moved into the room, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair next to my bed. Anthony, who brought daily updates on the foundation, ensuring everything was under control. Edward, who adjusted his schedule to spend at least an hour a day with me. And a procession of employees, residents, and collaborators from the foundation. The doctor, a middle-aged cardiologist with kind eyes, was direct when we discussed my discharge. "Mrs. Sarah, your heart is fine considering the episode, but I need to be frank. If you continue at the same pace, I cannot guarantee you'll be so lucky next time." I nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. "What do you recommend, doctor?" "Drastically reduce your workload, delegate responsibilities, watch your diet, get moderate exercise, and most importantly, reduce stress." When I returned home a week later, I found Richard, Linda, Anthony, and Edward waiting for me. On the living room table, a pile of folders, documents, and a laptop. "What is all this?" I asked, sitting on the sofa carefully. "A succession plan," Edward replied. "We've been working on it while you were hospitalized." "Succession?" I repeated, confused. "I'm not dying." "No, thank God," said Linda. "And we want to keep it that way. You built something incredible, Mom, but it's time to share the load." They explained the plan to me in detail. The foundation would be reorganized into departments, each with a responsible director. Anthony would take over as general director, with Richard coordinating the health and wellness area, and Linda the administrative area. "You remain as president of the board," Edward explained. "The vision and values remain yours, but the day-to-day operations pass to the team." I looked at those people, my children who had come a long way on their path to redemption, my friend who had become a pillar of support, my lawyer who had become a partner in dreams. I felt a wave of gratitude and, yes, pride. "It seems you've already decided everything," I commented, trying to sound indignant but failing miserably. "Only because we know you too well," Anthony replied with a smile. "We knew you would resist the idea of slowing down." He was right, of course. Part of me wanted to protest, to insist I was perfectly capable of continuing in command. But another part, the wiser part, perhaps recognized it was time for a transition. "And what am I going to do with all this free time?" I asked, half joking, half serious. "Live," Richard replied simply. "Enjoy the garden you love so much, read the books that have been piled on your nightstand for years, maybe even travel a little. And continue to be our inspiration and counselor," Anthony added. "The foundation will always be your legacy, Sarah. We are just helping to carry it forward." In the following months, I gradually adapted to the new routine. At first it was strange not to have to run to meetings, not to have the phone ringing constantly, not to have piles of reports to review. I discovered the pleasure of tending my garden of cooking without rushing of reading an entire book in one afternoon. I started taking daily walks around the neighborhood, joining a Tai Chi group in the park, participating in a book club at the local library. I still visited the foundation regularly, of course. I participated in board meetings, gave occasional talks, received groups of visitors interested in our story. But now it was different. I was a mentor, a counselor, an inspiration, no longer the person responsible for every decision. On one of those visits, I watched Anthony leading a meeting with the expansion team. He had assumed the role of general director, naturally combining his academic experience with surprising administrative skill. Richard coordinated the health team with the professionalism and empathy he always showed in his work as a physical therapist. He had developed innovative programs of adapted physical activity for seniors that were being implemented in all units. Linda, once obsessed with status and appearances, now immersed herself in the foundation's administration with the same precision she applied to accounting, but with a nobler purpose. Her transparent financial management program was being adopted as a model by other nonprofit organizations. Watching them work in harmony, I felt a wave of pride so intense it almost took my breath away. They had transformed their lives just as I had transformed mine. At home that night, I sat on the patio as usual. Autumn was at its peak, the golden leaves dancing in the wind. I thought about how my life had changed since that fateful Christmas night. The trauma of abandonment would never completely disappear, just like the scar on my heart after the heart attack. But I had learned to live with those marks, to transform them into reminders of my own resilience. I thought of Arthur, who would have loved to see what we built. I thought of the residents of our centers, who now age with dignity and purpose. I thought of the families who were learning to better care for their elders, breaking the cycle of abandonment. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Linda. "Mom, I just got the news. The New Dawn Foundation has been nominated for the National Human Rights Award in the category of Protection for the Elderly." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy. "Congratulations to all of you." "To all of us," she corrected. "This never would have happened without you. By the way, they want you to be the one to receive the award if we win." We talked for a few more minutes about the details of the ceremony that would take place in the city the following month. When I hung up, I realized I was smiling. Not for the recognition itself, but for what it represented. The validation that our cause was getting the attention it deserved. The awards ceremony was an elegant event at the National Palace. I was accompanied by Richard, Linda, and Anthony, all dressed formally for the occasion. When they announced that the New Dawn Foundation had won in its category, the round of applause was deafening. I walked up to the stage with slow but steady steps, leaning lightly on Richard's arm. The President of the Republic handed me the trophy, personally praising the revolutionary work of the foundation. In front of the microphone, I looked at the audience of authorities, journalists, and representatives of human rights organizations. I took a deep breath before speaking. 4 years ago on Christmas Eve, I was abandoned by my family in a nursing home against my will. The next morning, I discovered I had won $5 million in the lottery. A murmur went through the hall. Many knew my story through the documentary, but hearing it directly always had an impact. I could have used that money in many ways. I could have taken revenge. I could have lived in luxury. Instead, I chose to transform my pain into purpose. I founded New Dawn not only as a response to what I suffered, but as an affirmation that growing old does not mean losing value. I paused, searching for my children's faces in the audience. They looked at me with teary eyes. This award is not just for me or for our foundation. It is for every senior who has ever felt invisible, disposable a burden. It is for every family struggling to care for their older members without adequate support. It is for every professional who dedicates their life to ensuring dignified aging. I raised the trophy, and it is also a message. It is never too late to start over. It is never too late to transform pain into purpose. It is never too late to create a legacy that transcends our own existence. The applause that followed was accompanied by many tears in the audience and on the stage. When I returned to my seat, I was hugged by Richard and Linda, a family embrace that now had a different meaning, not of possession, but of partnership. That night, staying in an elegant hotel in the capital, we celebrated with a private dinner. Toasts were made, stories were shared, plans for the future were excitedly discussed. At a certain point, Anthony raised his glass in my direction, to Sarah, who taught us that true wealth is not in the money we earn, but in the purpose we find. Everyone toasted, and I felt a wave of gratitude so intense I could barely respond. When I finally found the words, I looked at that small group that had become my chosen family. To each of you, who helped me transform the worst moment of my life into the beginning of the best phase of it. That night, lying in the hotel bed, I reflected on the extraordinary journey I had lived over the past 4 years. From cruel abandonment to the construction of a national legacy. From family betrayal to the formation of a new family based not on blood, but on shared purpose. The lottery money had been the catalyst, yes, but the real transformation came from within. From the decision not to succumb to bitterness, to choose purpose over revenge, to believe that even at 73 with a broken heart there was still a path to follow. I fell asleep with a smile on my lips, at peace with the past and hopeful for the future. Sarah's legacy was not just the building's programs or policies, but the message my life now carried, that from our greatest pains can come our greatest purposes if we have the courage to transform betrayal into a new beginning. 5 years after that fateful Christmas Eve, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. At 78, I had found a balance that had eluded me for so long. Between work and rest, between memory and hope, between biological family and chosen family. The New Dawn Foundation continued to grow and evolve under the competent leadership of Anthony with the support of Richard and Linda. We now had 80 centers spread across the country, serving more than 5,000 seniors. Our caregiver training program had become a national reference, with material translated and being implemented in neighboring countries. I continued as president of the board, participating in strategic decisions, and serving as an ambassador for the cause. But my day-to-day life was much quieter, divided between my garden, which had become a small oasis of peace, my books, which I finally had time to read, and regular visits to the original center, where I had made dear friends among the residents. On a spring morning, while having coffee on the patio, watching the flowers I had planted months before, I received an unexpected call. It was from the Secretary of Social Welfare's office. Mrs. Sarah, the secretary, would like to invite you to a meeting in the Capitol next week. It's a matter of extreme importance related to national policy for the elderly. I accepted the invitation, intrigued. We had already established a solid partnership with the ministry, which had adopted many of our methodologies. What else could be on the agenda? I informed Anthony about the invitation, and he decided to accompany me. On the plane ride, we discussed possibilities. Maybe they want to expand the program even further, Anthony speculated, or implement some new guideline. Whatever it is, I replied, I'm curious to find out. The secretary received us in his office with great cordiality. After the initial greetings, he got straight to the point. Mrs. Sarah, Mr. Anthony, I called this meeting to discuss something I've been considering for some time. As you know, the issue of population aging is one of the biggest challenges our country will face in the coming decades. We nodded, aware of the demographic data showing the rapid aging of the population. The work of the New Dawn Foundation has been revolutionary, the secretary continued. You established a model that works, that preserves dignity, that creates community. And now I would like to propose something even more ambitious. He explained that the government was considering a complete reformulation of policies for the elderly, including the creation of a new federal agency dedicated exclusively to this issue. And we would like you, Sarah, to lead this effort as the National Secretary for the Elderly. The proposal took me completely by surprise. I looked at Anthony, who seemed as stunned as I was. Mr. Secretary, I'm flattered, I replied carefully. But I am 78 years old, and after a heart attack 2 years ago, I promised my family and myself that I would reduce my work pace. The secretary smiled. I understand perfectly, and we don't expect you to work alone. We would have a full team at your disposal. Your role would be primarily advisory and strategic, bringing your experience and vision to guide the national implementation of what you have already done so successfully at the Foundation. I promised I would consider the proposal carefully and discuss it with my family and team before making a decision. On the return trip, Anthony and I debated the pros and cons. It would be an extraordinary opportunity to amplify our impact to truly transform the reality of seniors across the country. But it would also mean new responsibilities, frequent travel, extensive meetings. What does your heart say, Sarah? Anthony finally asked. I reflected for a moment. It says I want to help. I want to make a difference on a national scale. But it also says I need to be realistic about my age and health. What if we could find a middle ground? He suggested. You accept the position, but with clear conditions about workload, remote work when possible, and with a strong team to execute your guidelines. The idea began to seem more viable. When we got home, I called an expanded family meeting, Richard, Linda, Edward, and Anthony, to discuss the proposal. I think you should accept, Richard said, surprising me, but with rigorous limits to protect your health. Agreed, Linda added. It's an opportunity to consolidate everything we've built to ensure it continues, even after, she hesitated. Well, that it continues forever. From a legal standpoint, Edward intervened, we can draft an agreement detailing your working conditions, ensuring there's no overload. Anthony nodded. And I can take on more responsibilities at the Foundation, so you can focus on this new role. I looked at that circle of people who cared about me, who respected my autonomy, but also worried about my well-being. I felt a wave of gratitude for having built this support network so different from the situation of abandonment I experienced years ago. I'll accept, I finally decided. But we will need to establish clear boundaries. 3 days of work per week, maximum virtual meetings whenever possible, and a review of the agreement every 6 months to ensure it still works for everyone. A month later, I officially took office as the National Secretary for the Elderly. The inauguration ceremony was widely covered by the press, many highlighting the symbolism of a 78-year-old woman who had been abandoned by her family in old age, now leading the national policies for the elderly. It's like closing a circle, a journalist commented during an interview, from victim to advocate, from abandoned to leader. I prefer to think of it as opening a new circle, I gently corrected, because this story isn't about me. It's about ensuring that other seniors have the support, resources, and respect they deserve. The work at the Secretariat was challenging, but deeply gratifying. I led the creation of a new regulatory framework for long-term care institutions, established guidelines for active aging programs in municipalities, and coordinated the formation of a national network of community centers inspired by the New Dawn Foundation model. My team was exceptional. Young professionals passionate about the cause, specialists with decades of experience, and even some seniors who brought the perspective of living the issues we discussed. We worked in sync, respecting my limits on time and energy, but making the most of my experience and vision. At home, on the days I didn't go to the Secretariat, I followed the Foundation's work from a distance. Anthony had completely taken the reins with Richard and Linda, consolidating their leadership positions. The transition we had made was smoother than we expected. On a Sunday morning, while having my morning coffee on the patio, I received an unexpected visit. It was Mary Richards' ex-wife, accompanied by my 2 teenage grandchildren, Louis and Julia. I hadn't seen them in almost 5 years since the day of the abandonment. Richard and Mary had divorced shortly after that fateful Christmas. He never went into details, but I understood that the scandal and shame had been the final blow to an already fragile marriage. The grandchildren, who at the time were 13 and 15, stayed with their mother, and contact with me had been lost in the midst of the turbulence. "Grandma Sarah," said Julia now, a young woman of 20, her voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" I invited them in, my heart racing with surprise. Mary looked uncomfortable but determined. "Sarah," she began, sitting rigidly on the sofa, "I know I have no right to be here after everything, but the kids insisted. They saw the documentary at college and, well..." "We were horrified," Louis interrupted now, a young man of 18. "We didn't know exactly what had happened that Christmas. We just knew you had gone to a nursing home and then you became famous." "Dad never talked much about it," Julia added, "and after they separated, we kind of lost touch with that side of the family." I looked at my grandchildren, so grown up, so different from the teenagers I knew. I felt a pang of sadness for the lost time, for the memories that could have been built. "And now we're in college," Louis continued. "I'm in my first year of med school, and my medical ethics professor showed us your documentary. When I saw your story, when I understood what had happened, I was devastated." "We've wanted to find you for months," Julia said, tears shining in her eyes. "But we didn't know if you would receive us, if you would forgive us for being part of that, even without knowing." I felt my heart open even more. These young people were not to blame. They were just children at the time, dragged along by the mistakes of adults. "You don't need forgiveness," I replied gently. "You had no choice in that situation, and I am very happy that you came to see me now." Mary, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "I am also to blame. I supported Richard's decision. I thought we were doing what was best, but I was wrong. So wrong. I saw your work with the foundation from afar. I saw everything you built, and I felt deep shame for our role that night." Tears were now streaming freely down her face. It was the first time I had seen any sign of genuine remorse from her. "What happened happened," I replied, surprising myself with the ease with which the words came out. "The important thing is what we do from here on out." We spent the rest of the morning talking, catching up on our lives. Louis talked about his desire to specialize in geriatrics, inspired partly by my story. Julia, a social sciences student, was interested in public policies for vulnerable populations. When they left, we exchanged phone numbers and promises of new meetings. The reconciliation that had begun years before with my children now extended to another generation, closing a cycle I didn't expect to complete. That night, I reflected on how my life had changed since that moment of betrayal. From abandonment in a nursing home, a national foundation emerged. From the pain of being discarded, a purpose was born that helped thousands of people. From the family that rejected me, an expanded circle of relationships emerged, some of blood, others of choice, all meaningful. The following years brought new challenges and joys. The work at the Secretariat resulted in concrete changes in national policies for seniors. The New Dawn Foundation continued to grow under the competent leadership of Anthony, Richard, and Linda. My grandchildren became regular presences in my life. Louis eventually did an internship in the Foundation's health department, and Julia developed her master's thesis on the impact of our policies. At 80, I decided it was time to retire completely from formal positions. I left the National Secretariat for the Elderly and the Foundation's board, passing the torch to younger but equally committed people. "I'm not abandoning the cause," I explained during my farewell party. "I'm just changing my way of contributing. From now on, I will be a storyteller, sharing what I learned, inspiring others to continue this essential work." And so I did. I began to write my memoirs, to give occasional talks to receive students and researchers interested in my journey. My home became an informal meeting point for discussions about aging purpose and personal transformation. On a quiet autumn afternoon while writing in my garden, I received a visit that would close another circle. It was an elderly woman leaning on a cane, accompanied by a caregiver. It took me a few seconds to recognize her. It was my roommate from that first night in the nursing home 5 years earlier. "Mrs. Teresa?" I asked, unsure. She smiled, nodding. "The one and only Sarah. It took me a while, but I finally came to visit you." I found out that Teresa had followed my journey through television and newspapers. When her son decided to transfer her to another nursing home, she insisted on seeing one of the new Dawn Foundation centers. "I live in the South Zone Center now," she explained proudly. "It's a wonderful place. I have my own room, I participate in activities, I make new friends. And all because of your courage in transforming that terrible night into something so positive." That visit moved me deeply. Seeing that my work had directly impacted someone who witnessed my most vulnerable moment was a form of closure I didn't know I needed. As I grew even older, I began to think about the true meaning of legacy. It wasn't just about buildings, programs, or policies, although all those were important. It was about the lives touched, the mindsets transformed, the possibilities opened for people who previously felt invisible. On my 82nd birthday, I received a special surprise. The foundation team had compiled a video with testimonies from dozens of residents of our centers, employees, family members, and even authorities who had worked with us. One of the most moving testimonies was from a 90-year-old woman, a resident for 3 years at one of our centers. "Before coming here, I was just waiting to exist until I died," she said, looking directly at the camera. "Now at 90, I am living. I have friends, I have purpose, I have dignity." And all this because one woman transformed her own tragedy into hope for all of us. Thank you, Sarah, for giving me a reason to wake up every day. I watched the video with tears in my eyes, surrounded by my expanded family. Richard and his new wife Linda, and her husband, my now adult grandchildren, Anthony, Edward, and several dear friends I had made along this extraordinary journey. Looking at those beloved faces, I reflected on the incredible path I had traveled, from the deep pain of abandonment to the transcendent purpose I had found, from the $5 million I won in the lottery to the thousands of lives I helped transform. I never imagined on that cold Christmas Eve that the worst experience of my life would become the catalyst for the best phase of it. That the forgotten ticket in my pocket wouldn't just be a financial prize, but the beginning of a journey of redemption, purpose, and legacy. Life gave me a second chance, and I seized it not only to reinvent my own existence, but to create a better path for so many others walking the same path of aging. As the party continued around me, I closed my eyes for a moment and visualized Arthur, my husband, my partner of so many years. I imagined he would be proud of the woman I became after his passing, of the strength I found in adversity, of the purpose I discovered in pain, of the legacy I built from abandonment. In my 82 years of life, I had learned that destiny sometimes has a peculiar sense of humor, that our greatest falls can lead to our most significant ascensions, and that it is never ever too late to start over. The lottery ticket my children didn't know I had, the prize that transformed the abandoned old woman into a force for change, was just the beginning of the story. The real treasure was discovering that even in the darkest moments, there is always the possibility of a new dawn. And this dawn for me had transformed into a glorious day.